The year was 2087, and the world had changed in ways her grandmother could never have imagined. Where once concrete jungles sprawled endlessly, now verdant corridors snaked between cities, connecting vast wildlife preserves that stretched across continents. "She's magnificent," whispered Marcus Chen, the sanctuary's head geneticist, as he joined Elena at the viewing wall. The tiger, Sasha, was not just any predator. She was one of the last naturally born tigers on Earth, her bloodline untouched by the genetic modifications that had saved her species from extinction 50 years earlier. Elena nodded, her weathered hands bearing scars from decades of working with the world's most dangerous creatures. "Her cubs are due any day now. Pure genetics, Marcus, no human interference. It's been 30 years since we've seen a natural birth in this sanctuary." The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It began in 2042, when the Great Collapse nearly wiped out both human civilization and the planet's megafauna. Climate disasters, habitat destruction, and the sixth mass extinction had reached a tipping point. Humanity faced a choice: continue the path of dominance that led to mutual destruction, or forge a new relationship with the natural world. The turning point came when Dr. Sarah Kimani, a wildlife biologist in Kenya, made a revolutionary discovery. While studying the last pride of lions in the Masai Mara, she observed something unprecedented. The lions had begun protecting human settlements from climate refugees and marauding gangs. The predators, sensing the shift in the ecosystem's balance, had instinctively begun cooperating with humans for mutual survival. Elena remembered the day the first predator-human accords were signed. She was just a graduate student then, but she witnessed world leaders standing alongside ethologists and indigenous elders, creating a new framework for interspecies cooperation. The document established humanity as guardians rather than conquerors, protectors rather than exploiters. Now, as she watched Sasha prepare for motherhood, Elena reflected on how far they'd come. The global predator sanctuary network spanned every continent, with corridors allowing safe migration and genetic diversity. Humans lived in bio-integrated cities that worked with natural systems rather than against them. Children grew up learning to communicate with wolves, understanding the subtle language of great cats, and respecting the ancient wisdom of apex predators. "The irony isn't lost on me," Marcus said, breaking the comfortable silence. "We spent millennia fearing them, hunting them, driving them to extinction. Now we've learned that our survival depends on theirs." Elena smiled, remembering her first encounter with a pack of wolves 20 years ago. She had been terrified, armed only with research equipment and good intentions, but something in their eyes, an intelligence, a recognition, had changed everything. They hadn't seen her as prey or threat, but as a potential ally. "Tomorrow, when those cubs are born," Elena said, "they'll be the first generation to grow up in a world where humans and predators are true partners. They'll never know the fear their ancestors carried in their DNA." As if responding to her words, Sasha looked up at the observation deck. For a moment, predator and protector locked eyes through the glass, two species that had learned to trust each other against all evolutionary instinct. 10-year-old Kaya Okafor crouched silently in the tall grass of the Serengeti Preserve, her dark eyes fixed on the lioness and her 3 cubs playing 50 meters away. Unlike her great-grandmother's generation, Kaya felt no fear, only wonder and responsibility. She was part of the first generation of humans raised in the symbiotic education program, where children learned alongside young predators in carefully managed environments. "Remember," whispered her mentor, Jacob Wyndham, a grizzled former poacher turned protector, "you're not just observing, you're building a bridge between worlds." The lioness, Amara, was one of Kaya's childhood companions. They had grown up together at the Human Predator Integration Center in Tanzania, where human children and predator cubs learn to understand each other's languages, both spoken and unspoken. Kaya could read Amara's body language as easily as her own mother's expressions. 300 kilometers away, in the canopy observation post of the Amazon Preserve, 16-year-old Diego Ramirez was documenting the hunting patterns of a jaguar named Tlacaelel. Diego's tablet was filled with behavioral notes that would help other protectors understand the complex social structures of solitary predators. His great-grandfather had been a cattle rancher who shot jaguars on sight. Now, Diego was preparing to spend his life ensuring their survival. The children of 2087 lived in a world where the old boundaries between human and animal territories had dissolved into something far more sophisticated. Bio-integrated communities existed within the natural ranges of predators, creating a mesh of coexistence that previous generations had thought impossible. In the Arctic Research Station, 12-year-old Yu Kapianak watched polar bear cubs tumble in the snow while their mother, Nayeli, rested nearby. Ayu's Inuit heritage had always honored the relationship between humans and polar bears, but now that ancient wisdom had become the foundation for a global philosophy. Her grandmother's stories of spirit animals and respectful hunting had evolved into a scientific framework for interspecies communication. The children learned early that they were not just students, but guardians in training. Each one would be paired with a predator family, studying their behavior, protecting their territory, and ensuring the genetic diversity necessary for species survival. It was a sacred trust that replaced humanity's ancient role as hunter with something far more complex and meaningful. Kaya's tablet chimed softly with a message from her peer group in Siberia, where young Nikolai Petrov was documenting the territorial behavior of a tiger family. The Global Youth Protector Network allowed children from every corner of the world to share their observations and learn from each other's experiences with different predator species. "Look," Jacob pointed toward the horizon, where a herd of wildebeest moved across the savannah. Amara's cubs are learning to hunt, but they're also learning something their ancestors never knew. Humans can be trusted. As if summoned by his words, Amara rose gracefully and approached their hiding spot. She stopped just 10 meters away, golden eyes meeting Kaya's brown ones. In that gaze was recognition, acceptance, and something that might have been friendship. The lioness called softly to her cubs, who bounded over to investigate the strange, upright creatures that smelled of safety rather than danger. This was the miracle of their generation. Predators who saw humans as protectors rather than threats, and humans who understood that their own survival was inextricably linked to the wildest creatures on Earth. The children growing up in this new world would inherit a planet where apex predators roamed freely, their numbers growing rather than diminishing, their ancient wisdom preserved and honored. Commander Elena Vasquez, now in her 70s but still sharp as the claws of the tigers she protected, stood before the assembled Global Predator Council in the Biodome of New Geneva. Representatives from every continent filled the amphitheater, their faces marked by years of dangerous, rewarding work. Behind them, through the transparent walls, wolves, bears, and great cats moved freely through. The integrated parkland that surrounded the city. 53 years ago, Elena began, her voice carrying the authority of decades spent earning the trust of humanity's former enemies, we made a promise, not just to ourselves, but to every apex predator on this planet. Today, I stand before you to report that we have not just kept that promise, we have exceeded it. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the remarkable statistics. Tiger populations had grown from fewer than 3,000 in 2030 to over 45,000 today. Wolf packs roamed territories they hadn't seen in centuries. Polar bears, once threatened by melting ice, now thrived in hybrid natural-artificial habitats that provided year-round stability. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, now director of Asian predator programs, rose from his seat. His body bore the scars of a lifetime, working with tigers, including a distinctive mark across his left arm from his first year as a protector. "The success stories are undeniable," he said, "but our greatest achievement isn't in numbers, it's in trust." He gestured to the viewing area, where his longtime partner, a magnificent tiger named Akira, rested with her latest litter of cubs. These cubs have never known fear of humans. Their genetic memory has been rewritten not through science, but through generations of positive interaction. Maria Santos, the Amazon Preserve coordinator, stepped forward. Her indigenous heritage had provided crucial insights into predator communication, and her work with jaguars had become the gold standard for human-predator cooperation. "In my grandmother's time," she said, "we believed animals had spirits that could be honored or offended. We've learned that was truer than we knew. These creatures carry the memory of our relationship in their very souls." The council reviewed the latest reports from children raised in the symbiotic education program, now adults leading their own predator protection initiatives. Young Kaya, now 30 and running the East African Predator Sanctuary, had pioneered new techniques for facilitating births of endangered species. Her childhood companion Amara's bloodline now included over 40 healthy descendants. But the meeting wasn't just about celebrating success. New challenges had emerged as predator populations recovered. Urban planning required constant adaptation as wolf packs and big cats established territories near human settlements. The delicate balance between protection and freedom demanded continuous vigilance. "We've learned," Elena continued, "that being protectors means more than preventing extinction. It means understanding that these creatures are our partners in maintaining planetary balance." The most profound change was psychological. Humans no longer saw themselves as separate from or superior to the natural world. Children grew up learning that the howl of wolves was as important as human language, that the territorial markers of big cats were as valid as human property lines. Dr. Chen, now elderly but still passionate about genetic diversity, presented the evening's most important data. "Natural births now outnumber assisted reproductions by 3 to 1, he announced. "We're witnessing the return not just of species, but of natural evolutionary processes we thought were lost forever." As the formal sessions ended, the council members moved to the observation terraces. Below them, in the twilight, predators and humans moved through shared spaces with easy familiarity. A wolf pack trotted past a group of human teenagers, neither species showing concern about the other's presence. Elena placed her weathered hand on the railing, watching a mother tiger teaching her cubs to hunt in the designated prey area. "My great-grandmother shot her last wolf in 1987, she said quietly to the gathered leaders. "She died believing predators were humanity's enemies. I wish she could see this. The oath they had taken decades ago to protect, preserve, and partner with the world's apex predators had transformed into something unprecedented in human history. A genuine alliance between species that had once been mortal enemies." Alarm echoed through the Siberian preserve at dawn, shattering the peaceful coexistence that had defined the sanctuary for decades. Maya Petrov, granddaughter of the young Nikolai who had once studied tigers as a child, raced through the snow toward the emergency beacon's location. At 28, she was the youngest apex guardian in the preserve's history, her bond with the tiger families legendary among her peers. "Status report," she called into her comm unit, her breath forming clouds in the -40 air. "Poachers, Maya," came the grim response from base command. "Military-grade equipment. They've taken Zoya's cubs." Maya's heart stopped. Zoya was more than just another tiger. She was the matriarch of the preserve's largest family group, a magnificent Siberian tiger, whose bloodline traced back to the first naturally born cubs of the Covenant era. Her 3 cubs, barely 6 months old, represented genetic diversity that had taken 50 years to achieve. The new resistance, as they called themselves, had emerged 5 years earlier. A radical faction of humans who believed the Predator Accords had gone too far. They argued that humanity had become subservient to animals, that precious resources were being wasted on beasts, while human problems remained unsolved. Their leader, Viktor Kozlov, was a former military commander who had lost his family in a rare predator attack during the early integration years. Maya, her mentor's voice crackled through the comm. Jacob Wyndham, now in his 70s and leading the global response team, had been called in from Tanzania. We're tracking them southeast toward the old industrial zone. But Maya, there's something else. Intelligence suggests this isn't just about the cubs. They're planning something larger. As Maya followed the tracks through the forest, she wasn't alone. Alexei, Zoya's mate, moved parallel to her path, his massive form visible through the trees. The ancient agreement between their species had evolved beyond mere coexistence. In times of crisis, they truly partnered. The bond between Maya and Zoya went back to childhood. Maya had been present at Zoya's birth, part of the 3rd generation of symbiotic education students. They had grown up together, learned from each other, developed a communication that transcended species barriers. When poachers threatened Zoya's family, they threatened Maya's as well. 3 hours later, Maya crouched behind a fallen log at the edge of the abandoned mining facility where the poachers had made their base. Through her scope, she could see the cubs in a reinforced cage, their distress calls carrying across the frozen wasteland. But the poachers weren't just holding them. They were streaming video to underground networks, broadcasting their victory over the false covenant. Humanity has forgotten its place, Viktor Kozlov's voice carried from the facility's loudspeaker system. We were apex predators long before we became their servants. These animals exist at our discretion, not as our equals. Maya's comm buzzed with incoming intelligence. The new resistance had cells worldwide, planning simultaneous strikes against major predator sanctuaries. If they succeeded, decades of trust building would be shattered. Worse, the psychological trauma to predator populations could trigger a regression to fear-based behaviors that had been eliminated for generations. But as Maya studied the facility, she realized something the poachers hadn't anticipated. Wild tigers had been converging on the area throughout the day. Not just Zoya's family, but tigers from territories hundreds of kilometers away. The distress calls of the cubs had triggered something deeper than simple parental instinct. "Jacob," Maya whispered into her comm, "you need to see this. We're not dealing with just one tiger family anymore. They're organizing." Through the scope, she watched Zoya emerge from the forest. The massive tigress approached the facility's perimeter with regal dignity, her golden eyes fixed on the building where her cubs were held. She was followed by Alexei, then by Dmitri, the old male from the Northern Territory, and Katya, the young female from the Eastern Range. "My God," Jakob's voice came through the comm. "Maya, you're witnessing something unprecedented, interterritorial cooperation in tigers. This isn't just about the cubs anymore, it's about the covenant itself." The tigers had understood what the poachers represented, a threat not just to individual young, but to the new world their species had helped build. In response, they were acting with coordination that challenged every assumption about solitary predator behavior. As night fell, Maya made her decision. The rescue wouldn't be a human operation with tiger assistance. It would be a joint action between true partners, each species contributing their unique strengths to protect what they had built together. The rescue of Zoya's cubs became legend, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Maya Petrov and her tiger partners didn't storm the facility with violence. Instead, they demonstrated something that shook the new resistance to its core. As dawn broke over the frozen wasteland, Viktor Kozlov and his followers found themselves surrounded not by an army, but by a peaceful assembly. Tigers sat calmly in the snow alongside their human partners, adults and cubs together, their presence both magnificent and utterly unthreatening. Maya walked slowly toward the facility unarmed, while Zoya paced beside her with regal composure. "Victor," Maya called out, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I know about your family. I know about the attack in 2082. I know why you're here." The standoff that followed changed everything. Through the facility's speakers, Victor's voice trembled with decades of pain. "They killed my daughter Maya, a wolf pack, during the early integration. She was only 8 years old." "I know," Maya replied, stopping just beyond the wire fence. "And I know that pack was rabid, infected during the climate disasters. They weren't part of the program. They couldn't be reached or reasoned with. What happened next would be studied by psychologists and ethologists for generations." Zoya, the mother tiger whose cubs were imprisoned, approached the fence. She lay down in the snow, her massive head resting on her paws, and began a low, rumbling vocalization. Not a growl, but something else entirely. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now 87 and arriving by emergency transport, later identified the sound as a mourning call, the same vocalization tigers use when grieving their own lost young. Somehow, through decades of interspecies contact, Zoya had learned to recognize and respond to human grief. The psychological impact on the new resistance members was profound. Hardened militants, many of whom had their own stories of loss and anger, found themselves face to face with creatures demonstrating empathy that transcended species barriers. "She's mourning with you," Maya said quietly. "Victor, in all our years of evolution, in all our history as predators and prey, has anything like this ever happened before?" The cubs' release came not through negotiation or force, but through transformation. One by one, the new resistance members laid down their weapons. Viktor Kozlov, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks, opened the cage himself. The reunion between Zoya and her cubs sparked something unprecedented. Tigers from across Siberia, drawn by some instinctive understanding, arrived throughout the day. By evening, over 200 tigers had gathered, the largest assembly of the species in recorded history. They came not to fight, but to witness the renewal of the covenant. But the true miracle was yet to come. As news of the Siberian gathering spread globally, similar assemblies began spontaneously occurring worldwide. Wolf packs emerged from the forests to sit peacefully near human settlements. Jaguars appeared at the edges of cities. Polar bears gathered on ice floes visible from human research stations. The predators of the world were sending a message. The covenant was not just between individual humans and animals, but between entire species. They had chosen coexistence, and they would defend that choice. Maya stood in the snow, watching Zoya's cubs nurse while their mother maintained protective watch. The failed rebellion had become something far more significant, a demonstration that the bond between humans and predators had evolved beyond survival strategy into genuine love. 60 years ago, Dr. Vasquez said, joining Maya in the growing dusk, we thought we were saving them from extinction. Today, I realize they were saving us from something worse. From losing our capacity for wonder, for partnership, for growth beyond our primitive fears. The Global Predator Council's final report on the incident concluded that humanity had passed a crucial test. The new resistance represented the last gasp of the old world view. that strength meant dominance, that different species couldn't truly coexist. Their conversion to protectors themselves marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Children born after the Siberian gathering would grow up in a world where the idea of humans and predators as enemies seemed as archaic as believing the Earth was flat. They would inherit a planet where the wildest creatures were also the most protected, where apex predators served as guardians of entire ecosystems, and where humanity had finally learned that true strength came not from conquest, but from the courage to trust. Maya picked up one of Zoya's cubs, the tiny tiger purring against her chest. In that sound was the future, a world where the howl of wolves, the roar of tigers, and the laughter of children blended into a symphony of coexistence that their ancestors could never have imagined.